Book 5, Salem. Safety Assured, Leaving East of Medicetti. Chapter 21. There is now an official story. For the next couple of days, Perrin learned what a normal life looked like. He watched the sunrise over the eastern mountains. Then while his wife and daughter planted gardens in the morning, he built fences with deck and pado for the 80 acres. At midday meal, he helped Mari compile a list of the world's high and low points for the past 120 years, to present as a series of lectures Professor Copersey had already arranged for Mari to deliver to all of the upper school teachers during their break next week. After midday meal, he saw off Pado for the last few weeks of school in Salem, where he learned far more than he ever did in Edge, and most efficiently in only 3 hours each afternoon. Then he spent the afternoons finishing Deck's house with the men of the community, while Deck traveled to different ranches to select cattle. In the late afternoon, Rector Young came to help Pado prepare the land for an orchard, and Perrin was tasked to move larger rocks out of the way. Normal life, Perrin decided 5 days after their arrival in Salem, was bliss. "I'm still waiting for the stress to begin," he said as he sat down to a late dinner after nailing in the last shingles on the Brider's roof. "But I really don't think it will come. By the way, Deck and Jatesy can move in tomorrow night. Some women from the neighborhood are there now, sweeping it out for the furniture to be delivered tomorrow." "Jatesy will be thrilled," Murray said, sitting down across from him. "She's out with Deck and Pado bringing in his herd. You better hurry up before they arrive, so we won't miss the parade of steak." Perrin was already chewing. "After we get them moved in," he garbled and swallowed, "I can claim my office and start securing Salem. We could really use towers here, I've decided, and we could try smaller banners for the alphabet to spell out short messages." "And here you thought you'd have nothing to do in Salem." Perrin chuckled. "I've also been thinking a lot about Lorexania," he said thoughtfully. "I've been listening to the men talking while they work on the house, discussing somebody's horse that's down or how somebody else's new fence looks nice, and I realized I could have spent my whole life here instead of Idemia and Edge. I could have known all these people who worry and work and help each other as if they really are family. I've been wondering how my life would have been different had my great-great-grandmother followed her father instead." He looked off at the wall for a minute, his eyes searching for a stone to stare at, but only seeing wood. He settled for a knothole. "All because of her choices, my family lived for generations a life less than it could have been. Did she really believe she was on the right side? Grandfather Pear remembered her as a boy, and he said she was always sad. I wonder if she ever regretted her decision. It took us 4 generations to get back to where we should have been. I also wondered if Lex's failure was behind the king's anger. Judith said that Lorexania was quite outspoken. What if her family leaving, and her making a fuss about it, caused so much of what our society experienced over the next several years? Just a few people's choices can affect thousands, maybe even more." "Maybe, but maybe not," Mari said. "People make mistakes, but the Creator seems to know those mistakes are going to be made and prepares a way back. The point is, we made it back. I don't know what my ancestor Barnos was thinking when he settled in Edge. Why did he leave the Zenas family? Then again, if our lives didn't play out the way they did, how would we have ever met each other? There must have been some divine help, don't you think?" Perrin stopped staring at the knothole and looked at his wife. "That's why I married you, isn't it? You always see the sides I can't." Mari reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "And you always see the sides I don't notice. Works pretty well that way, doesn't it? But really, Perrin, I doubt an officer named Shin marrying a loud and outspoken woman really could have changed the course of the world now, do you?" She batted her eyelashes. "Who knows? It happened just recently. Apparently we Shins are attracted to loud Zenuses." Mari laughed. But I didn't change the course of the world. You kept reminding me that no one in Idemia cared about a little woman in edge." "But they did, Mari," said Perrin, suddenly sober. "They always did. Gadaman's file was proof. I'm sorry I never realized that." "Oh, don't be. Look where it got us. Now, eat your dinner. Cattle are coming, and they don't want to know you've had beef." Perrin wasn't quite up to going meatless that year. Soon after, Perrin and Mari sat on their front porch watching 100 bulls, cows, and calves noisily moo their way down their dirt road, kicking up dust and occasionally protesting the snap of Deck's whip as he and several other men steered the livestock into the pasture behind his new house. Shem's father, Bosco, stood at the gate, waiting to funnel in the cattle. He grinned as he saw another herd coming to enjoy the land that he used for so many years. Deck, sitting proudly atop of Clark, who helpfully nickered at a few errant calves, looked as if he would never stop smiling. But Pato, with Jatesy in the wagon next to him, looked as if he'd never stop scowling. From their position at the back of the herd, the scent was considerably stronger. But Jatesy didn't notice, as she beamed at her husband silhouetted in the setting sun. "So," Mari said as she coughed away another dust ball, "these are our new neighbors. A little, earthy, aren't they?" By the time the cattle were settled in, it was fully dark. Mari didn't recognize the man who came up to her porch until he spoke. "So, what do you think of your son-in-law's herd?" "Guy Gleese? How long have you been here?" "I arrived a little while ago and brought someone along to meet you, but then we saw that stray calf and got caught up in all the excitement of catching it. I'm a little dirtier than I like to be, but—" He brushed the muck off his trousers apologetically. "Oh, but nothing. Come on in and clean up," Mari said, holding open the door. The guide beckoned to someone in the dark, and 2 more men came up to the door. Mari recognized Shem, who was in deep conversation with the second man, who was in his early 30s. "Mari," Shem said, "is Perrin around?" "He should be back soon," she said, as she let the men into the house and showed them to the washing room. "He was trying to pick out tomorrow night's dinner. I'm sure Deck will be shooing him back in any moment now." Perrin did come in the back door a few minutes later, wearing a sheepish grin, with his son and daughter pushing him. "I told you, not until later in the season, and only one that Deck hasn't grown fond of. Mother," Jatesy put her hands on her hips, "he was out there outlining the rump of the biggest bull with a piece of chalk and labeling it Perrin's. He's lucky the cattle of Salem are afraid of him, too, or he would have been wearing a horn in his gut." The guide scratched his head. "Cattle are afraid of Perrin? Interesting. Maybe we could use him when it's time to corral the lazy ones wandering in the hills." Jatesy shrugged. "Perhaps. Deck spent a whole raining season trying to understand why they run from him, but we didn't come to any conclusions." "That's because you 2 were too busy staring at each other with gooey eyes," Pato reminded her. "Oh yeah," she giggled. "That's probably true." "Well, I'm glad you're here," Shem said. "This is someone I want you to meet. Karaka Mondell. Actually, Mari and Perrin, you've already met him, but you probably don't realize it." Mari analyzed the man. His face was rather plain and not distinguished in any way. Average. Quite overly average, if that were possible. "I'm sorry, I don't remember you." Karaka smiled. Most people don't remember or even notice me. That's why I'm so good at my work. But your situation rendered you even less likely to notice me. When we were in the same room, you were more nervous than any woman I ever saw. At one point, you were so pale, I was sure you were about to pass out. I tried several times to make eye contact and assure you all was well, but you rarely looked up. He waited for her to put it all together. Mari frowned. Idemia? The office outside the main conference room? Karaka nodded. I was the recorder, have been for many years. Perrin folded his arms. I don't remember you. No surprise there. Some people have a face that's unforgettable. Mine is unmemorable. Then again, the first time you were there, you were accompanying your wife, who you marched out quite angrily, if I remember correctly. Perrin winced at the memory, and Mari squeezed his arm. And the second time you came in, you were wielding a sword ready to kill Chairman Nico Mal. At least that was our guess, or Gadaman. When you left, you were a rather changed man. Perrin nodded and bit his lip. Not my best moments, were they? Actually, I thought they were. Karaka grinned. I was a bit disappointed you didn't bloody that ridiculous table. He stopped when he saw the guide, whose expression changed only in his eyes. They had darkened. I'm sorry, he said to the guide. It's probably a good thing I've come home. I'm sounding too much like Idemia. We'll work it out of you. Glees patted him on the back. Come, sit down. Tell us what else you remember. Mari winked at her husband. There is some news, Guide Glees said with exceptional heaviness. And considering what Karaka knows, I thought he may be able to provide Perrin with some information as he secures Salem. Karaka is out of work now. Shem turned to him. I just thought you were here on leave. No, there have been a great many changes in the world since last week, Karaka said darkly, and I've left for good. I'm calling everyone home, except for 2 scouts who will stay working the stables for the administrators, Glees announced to the surprised family. I recently learned that's a good place for gaining information. I'm sending reinforcements to help Jothan get the last of our people out of the world during the next few weeks, until things quiet down a bit. Why? Mari said, trepidation welling inside of her to see the guide so concerned. For the past week, she'd forgotten that the rest of the world still swirled to the south of them. What happened? Guide Glees sighed. Well, as you know, we smuggled you out of Edge on the pretense of killing you. Which is quite the honor, Karaka grinned mischievously. The last person we killed was Guide Pax. Glees managed a dim smile. That's true, but a problem has arisen. You see, we created your death as a cover for your disappearance. However, it seems that Administrator Genev, who has decided to make Edge his permanent base for the time, has concocted his own story. With that, the guide looked intently at Karaka. Karaka's previous grin was replaced with apprehension. They need to know, Glees prodded him. It may help Perrin with his future plans. The guide sat down on a chair, an air of gloom accompanying him, and Karaka reluctantly sat in another next to him. Jatsi and Pato sat on one of the sofas, and Perrin and Shem sat on the other, with an anxious Mari between them. Karaka leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I'm not sure where I should start. Start with Idemia's official story, Guide Glees suggested. Get it out of the way. Karaka nodded and exhaled. There is now an official story as to what happened to the Shin family. Your house was searched and they found Terep's map. Perrin rubbed his forehead. What did they do with it? Sent it to Idemia for evaluation, but the story released by the administrators is that it is the original one. Good. Perrin's shoulders sagged. It just may be preserved still. So now I'm a traitor? He asked with a pitiful smile. Karaka shook his head. No, not the hero of Edge. You're still a hero, but a tragic one now. Really? Perrin said. And how did that happen? Jatsi and Pato leaned forward on the sofa, fascinated. Karaka squirmed. The story is the map wasn't Colonel Shin's. It was Sergeant Major Zenus's. Mine? Shem exclaimed. Well, that's not fair. I didn't even get to see the original. Oh, poor Shem. Mari chuckled and patted him on the knee. Karaka saw it and oddly winced before looking away. Why would it be in my house if it was Shem's? Perrin asked, insulted that he didn't get credit or blame for possessing the map. Karaka shifted in his seat, feeling the pressure of so many stares. He shielded his eyes before he said the next part. Because Shem gave it to Mrs. Shin. What? Now it was Mari's turn to exclaim. Why me? Karaka looked pleadingly at the guide. Remember, Karaka, you're only telling them the official story. You're not behind any of this. Karaka groaned and closed his eyes so as to not see the line of victims who sat before him, innocent of his news, as he blurted, so that Mrs. Shin could run away with the sergeant major. Every mouth in the room fell open, except for the guide's and Karaka's. Finish it, said Glees grimly. According to the administrators, Mrs. Shin and the sergeant major were together for quite some time. The colonel followed them into the forest to stop their togetherness. Karaka made some vague hand motions and then tried to wipe it all away. Mari and Shem slowly turned to look at each other. Pato snorted a guffaw. Jatsi slapped a hand over her mouth. Perrin's breathing began to quicken. Horrified, Mari stared at Shem. People in Edge now thought that she and him, feeling as if she'd just been punched in the gut, Mari leaned toward her husband as Shem leaped off the sofa as if stabbed by it. What? How? Why? Shem spluttered as he paced the floor. He instinctively walked back to his spot on the sofa, saw Mari, and spun around to not face her. Mari covered her eyes with her hand, but watched Shem between her fingers. Jatsi patted the seat next to her as Shem stomped aimlessly around the room. He threw his hands up in the air when he saw her. Instead of sitting, he marched to the eating room, took a chair, and slammed it down in the farthest corner of the gathering room. Plopping himself on it, he bounced his legs nervously. I never, not once did I ever, Shem, Perrin said sharply. Enough. No one said that you did. Shem leaped to his feet again. The administrator said He pointed at Mari, who was still so humiliated she wasn't sure she would ever come out of hiding. I don't believe this, he spun to Karaka. So all the soldiers in Edge now think that I and The only consolation Mari felt at that moment was that Shem was so shocked he couldn't bring himself to say her name. Karaka, wincing so fiercely that his face screwed itself into nearly a slit, nodded. No, Shem wailed, and sat down hard on his chair. Do you know how often I told them about the importance of being honorable and exact in everything? Do you know what I sound like now? The biggest hypocrite in the world. He hid his face in his hands. For how long? Perrin calmly asked Karaka. How long were Shem and Mari having an affair? That terrible word brought Mari out of hiding. Don't say it like that! Perrin kissed her forehead and put a comforting arm around her. His composure astounded her. I didn't mean it like that. What I meant to say is, what have the administrators suggested about the length of the, togetherness? Pato tried to stifle his laughter, but he couldn't, even with his sister jabbing him. I'm sorry, but it's so funny. Come on, Mother and Uncle Shem together? Who would believe that? This is hilarious. Maybe in a few weeks, Pato, said Perrin heavily. Seasons. Mari hid behind her hand again, realizing that her children had just heard about her supposed years, Shem said, quietly in the corner, his head hanging low. Pato scoffed. I don't get it. Just laugh it off. Another stupid administrative lie. We've dealt with those before. His sister glared at him. And what lies about you have they spread? This feels different, Mari murmured. One part of her wanted to shake it off, chuckle at the inanity, but this was no ordinary cut that would quickly heal. It was a stab in her gut, and that's where she felt it, aching and twisting. Karaka cleared his throat. It's been suggested that they had been together for quite some time, since before the land tremor. You see, it helps to explain the unusual behavior of the colonel, especially after his parents' death. The story is he was suspecting the affair to get relationship, he finally decided to call it. So his erratic behavior was connected to that, not to the death of his parents. The attack on Moreland was an attempt to impress his wife to come back to him, but instead it revealed that Shemzinus was a Girder spy. Colonel Shin decided to keep that a secret to preserve his reputation. Shem's head fell even lower. Perrin only shifted in his seat as Mari wilted miserably into him. Karaka sighed before he continued. Mrs. Shin's recent outburst about the findings of the expedition was an attempt to convince her husband to leave Edge to get him out of the way. When he refused to support her at the platform, he was demonstrating his devotion to the administrators. When he resigned, it was his last desperate attempt to win back his wife. He was torn between his two loves, his wife and the army. Pato's scoffing chuckle didn't spread to anyone else. Since Mrs. Shin and the sergeant major were, Karaka made some more vague hand movements, they made plans to abandon the colonel and his children. The map was to tell Mrs. Shin where to meet her lover, Shem. They were to run away to Terup's land together? Perrin shook his head at the absurdity. Karaka shrugged. So, everybody in Edge, Mari said from behind her hiding hand, now believes that I was with Shem. No, Karaka said quietly. I'm sorry to say that everyone in the world now believes you were with Shem. Messages went out to the forts a couple of days ago. Notices to the villages a little after that. There's already talk of another play. That was all Mari could take. No! Shem's head couldn't hang any lower without scraping the ground. I guess you didn't need to hear that part, Karaka mumbled apologetically. Everything I ever said to the recruits, Shem murmured. Everything I ever said will now sound like a lie. Mari gasped. My students! Oh, what must my students think? They had such foul mouths and minds as it was, and now? Even Pato winced at that. But hey, what do we care about what the world thinks? He tried again. Isn't that the point why we left? To not care about the world anymore? I know I shouldn't, Mari said, but I just can't help it. I do. I care. Next to her, Perrin sighed heavily in grudging agreement. But why are they saying all these things about Mother and Shem? Jatsi wondered. Why not just let them die in the forest? The answer hit Mari again in the gut, and she didn't think she'd eat again for days. I know why. He got it right, she nodded to Shem, whose name caught in her throat. Everything we ever said will be considered a lie. What I claimed on the platform, that can all now be dismissed because of what kind of a woman I have been revealed to be. It really is deviously clever. They couldn't destroy my words, so they destroyed my reputation, which rendered my words meaningless. And my husband, the beloved of the world, died in some tragic way in the forest, right? Karaka nodded. Trying to retrieve your body, which was riddled with arrows, which then fell into a cavern. You were both lost. Rather romantic. Perrin tried to smile. But Mari couldn't. So, Perrin Shin, who should have been High General of Idemia, falls because he naively followed his treacherous wife and was deceived by his closest friend. He remains the hero the administrators couldn't hope to destroy. I, on the other hand, was a far easier and more expendable target. Very good. Maybe you could have been an officer. Perrin kissed her again. Or worked for Genev, Peto whispered to his sister. So who's behind all of this news story? Jatsi wondered. Genev helped, I'm sure. But I've been thinking a lot over the past week, Perrin said, about the world. If it's any one person, I think it's Nico Mao. I remembered something the other day from back when I was in command school. He came to our diplomacy class to deliver a lecture on human nature. It was before he took over the government from King Oren, but he must have already been in the thick of planning it. He said humans have no extra ability or strength to look fear in the eye and say, "Come get me." He spent half an hour explaining how humans are just complex animals, that people can be manipulated to respond to stresses just like a horse, and to be led like one as well. He had done experiments with dogs. He'd strike a bell with a stick, then strike the dogs. Soon he only needed to strike the bell and the dogs cowered. Eventually, he just appeared without even a stick, and the dogs hid in terror. He said humans were no different and could never be anything better. So naturally, I spent the next 15 minutes arguing with him that because humans were the children of the Creator, their potential and abilities were far greater than mere animals. He just rolled his eyes whenever I said Creator. I was furious, and Mal was irritated that I challenged his position. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if we aren't all just part of one of his grand experiments. In this case, we're the dogs. I know you have a remarkable ability to irritate people, Father, Peto spoke up, but you really think all of this was Chairman Mao's attempt to prove his point to you? It's a little more complex than that, Mari decided. But for some reason, that sounds right. What lengths some people will go for entertainment. And ego, Perrin said. Chairman Mao had access to everything, Shem reminded them. All the administrators, control over the army, all the files. Mrs. Shin's file, Karaka added. Perrin shook his head. We destroyed it. You destroyed Gadman and Genev's file on her, Karaka told him, but you didn't get Captain Thorne's. Apparently he had a spy working for him, telling him everything that Mrs. Shin taught and didn't teach and taught extra in her classes. "Leonard," Mari whispered. "He was working for Thorn, exercising his horse." "What happened to us?" Jatsi asked, nodding to her brother. Karaka brightened a little to have a different subject. "Garters. Turned out they incorporated some of our story. We had said that Garters kidnapped your family from their houses, but Genevieve twisted that as well. Your father was hoping, according to the administrators, to use you and your brother to help retrieve your mother who had already run away with Shem. But at least now everyone also believes the Garters have returned in full force, so that's effectively scaring off people from trying to find their own ways to the ruins." "So what happened to Shem in this new story?" Pato asked a little too eagerly. Shem's head bobbed. "Still killed by Thorn," Karaka said. "The scouts took care of Dorman's body. Since it was dark, no one who witnessed the event seemed to question that it wasn't Shem who was killed, or they were threatened to state that it was." Pato frowned. "Oh, well, I suppose that makes Thorn quite the hero, huh? Killing the traitorous, adulterous Shem." Shem's head came up, a fierce look in his eyes. "A little," Karaka admitted, "but not as much as he probably wishes." "So he's not in charge of the fort?" Shem asked. "No, not at all. He's still recovering. Apparently, he was struck by a lightning bolt. His right arm was so badly burned it's permanently lamed." Shem winced, as did Mari, but Perrin's and Jatsi's faces remained immovable. "Karaka," Perrin said, "I'm sure it was my father's sword that he used. Do you know what may have happened to it?" "Rumor is that it was General Shin's sword that lightning struck when Thorn drew it to come after you, but it's damaged beyond repair." Perrin nodded once, satisfied. "I never thought it would tolerate taking an innocent life. Yes, I know that sounds strange, and I know it's not alive, but somehow I feel it got its revenge for Dorman's life. Nor would it allow itself to be used against anyone else. Somehow I feel my father may have been behind some of this." Karaka nodded. "I think you may be right about that. Well, even when Thorn's recuperated, he still won't be in charge," he continued. "That's part of the reason I came back. Genevieve has ordered commandants to govern every fort." "Commandants?" Mari asked. Perrin sighed. "Oh, we had provisions for that, but I never imagined they would actually use it. Essentially, it means the administrators have lost faith in the fort commanders and have appointed new political leaders to rule alongside the commanders. But it won't stay that way. The commandants will take over, no doubt. The army becomes a puppet for the administrators." Karaka nodded. "Already there is great pressure. Every single worker is being interrogated, moved around, and replaced in the administrative headquarters. No fort will look the same. Soldiers are being shuffled around like chips in a game of dices. Even High General Thorn now has to go through Chairman Mal for approval of anything." "Nico's angry that the cat let the favorite falcon fly out of the barn," Perrin said with his first genuine smile of the evening. "There's even talk of burning down the entire forest, from edge to moorland, just to find out what it hides," Karaka added. "And that's why I want everyone home now," Glees said. "If they destroy the roots, our people will be trapped in the world. The administrators haven't made up their mind yet about the forests, but Shem's root is no longer protected and is far more dangerous. If they do expose the forest, they will also uncover a great many of their own secrets, especially about the so-called Garters. I doubt they want to do that, but I'm not about to take any chances. I don't play dices." Karaka gave him a grateful smile before he turned back to Perrin. "Genevieve is personally overseeing Fort Shin. The name is staying, by the way, as a reminder to respect the Shin name, but to never trust anyone they love. I am sorry, he said, looking at Mari. Mari sighed and slouched on the sofa. Every person I've known for over 40 years, my friends, my mother's friends, the congregation, our neighbors, my students, the teachers, the officers, everyone will believe I'm nothing more than one of those girls who hung out at the northeast entrance. Just a regular sow. Mari, Perrin said sharply, stop that. Shem slapped his forehead. I used that entrance to sneak over to your house at night after Perrin and I came back from Idemia. He groaned. Oh, and I stayed all night at your place. Look at all the evidence I gave them. Perrin stood up between them, and Mari realized it was getting to him as well. The idea struck her that maybe worse than being labeled as a betrayer was being cast as the person foolish enough to be betrayed. Enough, both of you, Perrin ordered Shem and Mari. You have to let this go. None of it is true, and it all belongs to the world. We left that world, right? Pato was right, amazingly. We shouldn't care. Let them create whatever lies they want to, but it won't touch us. If you ever wanted another reason why we had to leave, now you have it. Let the world destroy itself. I refuse to let it hurt our family, and we will talk of it no more. Is that understood? Mari nodded, forcing herself to meet her husband's eyes. How could anyone not believe that she adored him? Olive Edge may think that the man they regarded with fear and veneration was little more than a clueless cast-off, but Mari hoped her husband could see the devotion in her eyes. Zenas! Perrin barked. Shem sat up instinctively and tried to look Perrin in the eyes, but mortification came over him as he noticed Mari watching him. Shem, will you let this die, here and now? Perrin demanded. Shem sighed. I want to. I've just never been so... So what will Brill and Karna think, Perrin? I used to write 'em all the time. And Fod, Jordan, Grampy, and Rigoff, and Poe. I don't care, so neither should you. Mari knew there was nothing Perrin could say that was further from the truth. Shem closed his eyes, but whispered, I'll try. Not good enough, Zenas. Shem took a breath and said louder, Yes, sir, I will let it die. Perrin walked over to him and pulled him out of the chair. Come here. He held Shem's face in his hands. Years ago, I accused you of being a Garter spy. I never would have imagined then that I would laugh about it later. Yet the very next day we did. This, too, will become funny. It never happened, and this story will never leave this family or this room. Jatesy and Pato nodded, as did Karaka and Gleese. I'll speak to those coming from the world to make sure none of them spreads the rumor, Gleese promised. It will die before it ever reaches Salem. Shem blinked away furious tears. Now tomorrow, Perrin said to Shem, I want you to come over and talk to my wife again like she's your sister, because that's what she's always been. Well, actually, a cousin on one side several times removed, and a cousin by marriage on another side a few times removed. You'll have to explain that terminology to me because I don't get it. How do you remove someone? Shem started to smile as Perrin released his face. Yes, you've got it completely wrong. And yes, I understand and agree. I just have to leave now. Tomorrow will be better. Mari made a motion to get up, but Perrin waved her back down as Shem abruptly headed out the front door without looking at anyone. Guide Gleese stood up. I'll take care of him. He nodded goodbye to the family and hastily followed Shem. Perrin turned to Karaka. I appreciate your coming to tell us all of this. Would be quite the family tale to share if ever we were to share it again. Karaka held up his hands. Again, I'm sorry I had to deliver the news. If it makes you feel any better, your memorial service 3 mornings ago in Idemia packed the entire kickball stadium. I saw the crowd gathering as I left. Perrin smiled slightly. I could never imagine why 50,000 people would all want to cram into the same arena. Well, I hope the weather was nice. It was. You will be missed, sir. The world will not be the same without the Shin family. He leaned over to Mari. All of you. Mari nodded a weak thanks. As Karaka went out the front door, the side door attached to the eating room burst open. Deck bounded in, dusty and happy. So, what do you think of my 100 babies? Beautiful, aren't they? Oh, no, he said, reading their bleak faces. Another document? Mari stood up, the dinner smile firmly in place. Not at all, Deck. Your babies are beautiful. But I just learned that I really have changed the world. Down the road, 2 figures walked slowly in the darkness. No words passed between them, but heavy sighs from the taller, younger man filled the air. You know, Shem, the older man started to say after the 8th sigh. Why did you choose me to be an assistant? Shem interrupted. I haven't even served as a rector. That's not entirely true, Shem. Before we sent you to Edge, what did Guide Hafadi do? Put his hands on my shoulders and declared me to be a rector, he finished in a whisper. That's right. Not a practicing rector such as Young, but endowed with the same guidance, inspiration, and ability as a rector. The same power the Creator grants to all scouts going to the world. And you behaved as a rector countless times for the Shins. Not always, he said miserably. And I'm not like the other 11 assistants. They're married, older, wiser. Shem, I didn't choose you. The Creator called you. He's the one who calls men to his work. He sees your heart. He only gives me glimpses into it. And I still see a man called by the Creator. Shem sighed for the 9th time. The guide put an arm around him. Remember, the Creator doesn't judge us on the temptations we encounter, but how we react to those temptations. It took Shem a minute to work up enough courage to say, So you know, then. It's just as I told you, Glees said kindly. The Creator gives me glimpses into people's hearts. Shem groaned at that revelation and whatever further insights the guide may have had about him. With forbearance Shem didn't feel he deserved, Glees asked, Did you ever act on those temptations? No, he whispered, never. I killed the thoughts over and over again, and Perrin thought I could never kill anything. Then you passed that test, and now you know how terrible it would have been if you had failed it. I couldn't even look at her guide. She was so upset, seeing herself as a common sow, and when he looked at me, I thought I was going to vomit. With the same calm patience, Glees asked, Do you think Perrin ever suspected? It was an excruciating long moment before Shem managed, Yes, I'm sure he did. I even sort of confessed it the night I told him everything in Deck's barn. When Perrin put her hand in mine before I dragged them through the forest, he twitched a signal, which, depending upon the situation, means I place you in charge of what is mine, should I not be able to take care of it. I tried to keep my mind clear, yet there it was again, and I was overwhelmed with, Guide, I don't want to feel that way about her. But so many times when I looked at her, Shem didn't say anything more, afraid he'd start blubbering. Yet still her husband loves you as his best friend and brother, Gleese said steadily. So apparently he still trusts you. But Guide, why? Shem wailed. Why was I plagued for so many years? He's my brother. She's his wife. I never gave in. Perrin's great-uncle Hogel even noticed it the first time, told me to keep my eyes on him, on Perrin. And I succeeded for a time. Then it would come back again. Shem rubbed his eyes as if to wipe away the memories. The worst were the past couple of years, he confessed. Gleese just listened, as he always did when a burden had to be voiced. She'd ask me to stay at night, often. She worried about him when he was sedated and practically dead to the world. She told me she felt so vulnerable, and she'd innocently hug me, then beg me to stay and comfort her. Shem squeezed his eyes shut. And so many ideas, so many ways I could take advantage of all of that would pour into my mind, showing me how easy it would have been. He stopped walking and covered his eyes with his hands, trying to shove back in the tears, the images, maybe even his confession. Gleese stood by patiently as his newest assistant agonized. But Guide, I promise you I didn't, Shem said, his hands dropping to his sides. I never, ever tried anything. I pushed away those thoughts as quickly as I pushed her away. And I stayed all night on that stupid sofa. And that's why this lie, which wasn't entirely a lie, has such an effect on you, Gleese said carefully. You're afraid you've been found out. Shem turned to Gleese, whose expression was much gentler than he thought he deserved. Guide, I was doing everything you and Hafati wanted me to do, everything the Creator commanded. So why? Gleese slid his hand up Shem's shoulder to keep a firm hold on him as they slowly continued on their walk. Because you were doing everything right, everything we wanted you to do, and everything the Creator commanded. That's why. What? Consider this. How important was this work? Very important. Nothing was more vital to Salem than bringing the Shin family here. And who wanted you to fail? Shem sighed yet again. The refuser. Exactly. And what better way to destroy this work than to destroy the Shin's trust in you? Had you succumbed in any way to the temptations you suffered concerning Mari Shin, they would have lost all trust in you, and then everything else would have been lost too. But you were stronger than his temptation, Shem. You refused to give in to the refuser, and you got them all to Salem safely. They continued on in silence for a few more minutes. Sensing that Shem wasn't feeling any better, the guide squeezed his shoulder. It's just about over, Shem. The Creator is immensely pleased with you, and he also knows the turmoil you've been in all these years. Why did you never tell me or Guide Hafati about this problem? One more sigh. It's not like it was constant. It came and went until recently. I was sure I could beat it for good on my own. I'd succeed for a couple of seasons, and then it would hit me again. Without warning, I'd be gripped with this. He gestured lamely to the air. So I'd fight it again. Finally, he quit stalling. Mostly, I was afraid you wouldn't let me go back if you knew how I felt about her. That would have been a possibility, Gleese admitted. But maybe we could have helped you fight it instead, Shem. You're not the first man to suffer from inappropriate feelings for someone who couldn't be his, you know. Shem shrugged guiltily. Gleese squeezed him again. Shem, she's right around the corner. I can feel it. The one who will make you forget all about old what's-her-name and make you grateful you never did anything improper. Then please guide me to that corner. The guide smiled. Now, that's not my job. But when you least expect it, that's when you'll find her. And she'll be well worth the wait. And that's the end of that chapter. Thank you.